Hello everyone, it is Jazz here, and already half the year has passed, so I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about my favorite books in 2017 so far. So not including any rereads in this, just because I already love those books because I reread them. So I'm only including books that were new to me in 2017 in this video, and I'm not really going to go in any particular order. I'm just gonna list my faves. I have about 7 books to talk about today, so let's go on and talk about them. So the first book that I have to talk about is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Basically, Neil Gaiman took some of the stories from Norse mythology and he added his own flair to them by making them sort of more readable in a modern context. So he added things like characterization, dialogue, little different descriptions and things like that. Neil Gaiman is one of my favorite authors, so of course I really loved his writing style and the things that he added to it, and he also added a really great sense of humor to some of these stories, which gave me a really good giggle every once in a while, and it's just really fun to read the way he shows how the different Norse gods kind of interact with each other. I also felt like I learned a little bit something about Norse mythology, which is really helpful if you're going to read Neil Gaiman's other works, because he does use this quite a bit in his other stories, and it kind of enriched other things of his that I had previously read. It's a really just cool, fast read, and it kind of teaches you something at the same time. Next, I want to talk about The Cricket in Times Square by George Selden. And this is an adorable little story about a country cricket who gets stuck in a picnic basket, and he ends up in the big city in New York City near Times Square. He ends up befriending a cat and a mouse, and they bond together in friendship to help a young boy and his family by the way of helping Chester the cricket learn to fully realize his musical skills. I read this for the Time Hopathon, and one of the challenges was to read a book that was recommended by one of the hosts of the challenge, and this was the book that I picked, and I was like, what have I been missing all my life by never reading this book? I love stories about talking animals and animals who befriend each other, because those are just good for the soul and the heart. And it has also a musical kind of vibe to it, which makes it extra super special. And I think there are more books in this series with Chester the Cricket. I want to continue reading it because this is definitely going on my children's book favorites list. Next book is Clockwork Prince, which is the second book in the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. Now, I also read previously to this one City of Fallen Angels, and I really did love City of Fallen Angels, which is the 4th Mortal Instruments book. But really, Clockwork Prince was the one where I wanted more than 5 stars, and that's why this made the list. So I wasn't really sure if I was going to love Clockwork Prince, because I only really liked Clockwork Angel. I did really enjoy Clockwork Angel, but it didn't quite reach 5 stars. It was just a 4-star book. But I have to say that Clockwork Prince, like, it won me over. I think I really fell more in love with the characters. I also really started to realize that it started to inject some of my favorite themes that are in classic books, and I think that really made me happy about reading the book. And also, I was in a deep steampunk fantasy kind of mood, and it is definitely a steampunk fantasy. And yes, the relationships between the characters were even more developed, and also there was quite a bit of action and fun stuff in it, and I just had a great time reading Clockwork Prince. Then I have Zot by Scott McCloud. This is a graphic novel collection, and it is of the black and white Zot comics. There was a previous color Zot comics, but the author basically rebooted it in black and white, so you definitely can read these without reading the color ones and still understand what was going on. This is the story about a girl named Jenny who lives in our world, and a character named Zot who kind of lives in a utopian version of our world. And he is a superhero in that world. First half of the comics are about Ginny going into Zot's utopian world and the things that happen there with crazy supervillains. And the second half of the book is Zot living in Ginny's world and what basically happens when a superhero kind of has to live with their normies like us. Zot was a recommendation from a friend that I got to have something to read for the Tome Topple readathon because I wanted to read a graphic novel for that, and I couldn't find one that was over 500 pages, so this one was recommended to me, and I'm really, really glad it was recommended to me. It has just this really cool quality of being really joyful, being about friendships and different kinds of relationships, and all those things just made me smile. But underneath all that, there are a lot of stories that if you really look deeply into them, they do make you think. And I think that is a really cool element to the Zot stories. I also really found it cool because Scott McCloud writes little things in between each group of stories and tells you kind of his inspirations for the stories or what went into the art. And I just like reading stuff like that. Next we have A Game of Thrones. A Game of Thrones was my first foray into the Song of Ice and Fire series, as well as my first foray into anything Game of Thrones related. I've managed to not be spoiled on the show at all, pretty much, and I am kind of waiting till the show is over to watch the whole thing and just binge watch it. I still wanted to read the books. I've noticed this year that I'm really into stories with a lot of characters and a lot of complexity, and this is definitely one of those stories. Something is always happening. I really did not want to put it down. Why was I ever intimidated to start this long book? Because it is a super, super fast read. The world building is really excellent. There were characters that I really endeared myself to and characters that I really, really loved to hate. So I'm so glad that I read A Game of Thrones, and I'm really excited to continue the rest of the series reading that. And I'm really glad too that I will know some of the Game of Thrones references now. I hope I don't spoil myself though from now on. I'm really scared about it. Then I have Lisey's Story by Stephen King. This is a story about a woman named Lisey. Her husband Scott died a little bit before this book starts, and he was a writer and had a lot of mysteries about where his inspiration for his stories came from, as well as just general backstory mysteries. Some of them Lisey knew, some of them Lisey did not know so much about, and it's kind of the revealing of some of those things that she is remembering about his past, as well as things that she didn't know. The less you know about Lisey's story, the better it is. It was a given that I was probably going to enjoy this because I do love a Stephen King novel because his character development is the bomb. What I really loved about this is that it's kind of different from some of his other books, but it's still very much like his kind of book. There are like those darker moments, but there's sort of a literary fiction feel to this, even though it's not necessarily a literary fiction because it is still kind of a dark fantasy mystery type thriller thing. The best parts of this are that there are some really beautiful sections of wording that are just amazing, where I was like, I'm dog-earing pages and I don't even care because I have to remember this phrase that he wrote because it was so eloquently put. And also, I really love the relationship between Scott and Lisey. First of all, because it is kind of about an established relationship, a marriage, and that is something you don't get to read often about, but also just their bond and what it meant to each of those characters was beautiful. Yes, it was just all the feels. It kind of is intense in places, but I actually think that's a really good thing. And I also like that this book is about sisterhood because Lisey's sisters are featured in this, and it talks a lot about their sister thing, as it's referred to, and that's really fun to read. Maybe it's just really fun to read to me because I don't have any sisters, and I enjoy reading books about siblings being siblings and what that dynamic is about. And the last one was one that I reviewed just recently in my wrap-up, Otherland City of Golden Shadows, which is the first book in Tad Williams' Otherland series, which is about people that live quite a bit in virtual reality, and they realize that children going into virtual reality are going into comas, and a group of characters tries to put a stop to whatever wrongness is going on in the virtual world, and insanity kind of ensues. That's a weird short summary, but it works. A really crazy mixture of science fiction and fantasy and any other kind of genre, because the virtual world kind of left Tad Williams with a lot of genre options, so you get a lot of different taste buds of things. But I also think it's great that you get to read so many different people. There are people in Africa featured in this, there are people in America featured in this, there are people from Australia in this. There's all kinds of different people and different ages of people, and that is really great. And all the characters, because there are quite a few in here, are really well developed, and the world building will blow your mind. And this is only the first book in the series, so I'm really excited to read the rest, and hopefully I will love them as much as I love this first book, because I had a really good time reading it. Those were 7 of my favorite books that I have read so far in 2017. I hope you guys are having a fabulous day, and I will see you all on Thursday. Thank you for watching. Bye!